Maybe it's when a close loved one passes away suddenly, and we begin to question, what is this? What is this meaning? Is there meaning to life? And what actually happens when this person is no longer with us? Hi, welcome to Elysian Ends. So, a worldview is the cluster of ideas or cluster of concerns that make up how we see reality. It answers the very basic questions and the deepest questions that we have about life. And the way we answer these questions impacts how we live out our lives. Now, today, we're going to be talking about what actually goes into a worldview. What are those ultimate concerns that are inside of a worldview? And what are the concerns that to have a well-formed worldview that we should seek to answer? And so I want to start off with a definition from one of my professors, Kenneth Samples. And in his book, A World of Difference, he states that a well thought out and developed worldview would contain minimally the following 12 ultimate concerns. So we're going to be going through 12 ultimate concerns that are kind of a minimum guideline for a well thought out worldview, if you will. Now, with that, when I say minimally, realistically, there could be more than 100 different concerns that we could put into a worldview. But these 12 are really kind of that foundational starting point of ultimate concerns that we should start to answer or seek to answer and then move on from there. And so the first one would be ultimate reality. What kind of God, if any, exists? Now, for the Christian, God is that central figure of reality. It's what all of reality is based upon. For the Christian, God is the only necessary being. In other words, it's the only necessary thing that truly exists. Everything else in reality, the spiritual realm, the physical realm, all other things outside of God are contingent. They're contingent in that they depend upon God. The next one, the second one, would be external reality. So we have ultimate reality. What is that centerpiece of reality? And then external reality. And this is asking the question, is there really anything beyond the cosmos? So, depending upon how you would answer the first question, the second question would actually follow from that. So, for example, if to the question of ultimate reality, you answered the question that matter or nature, as a naturalist or a materialist would answer those questions of what is ultimately real, if all things are simply matter, external reality, is there anything beyond the cosmos, would naturally have an answer of no, there is nothing beyond the cosmos. It would be, as Carl Sagan once said, the cosmos is all that there is or was or ever will be. The third in this set of worldview concerns would be knowledge. This gets into a realm of study called epistemology, and this is talking about what can be known and how can anyone know it. And so, as you can see, as you can imagine, as we look at the first two questions, the third question comes right alongside that and asks the question of how is it that we know things? And how we know things is going to be directly related to how we understand ultimate reality. Let me give you an example. If all we are is matter, so matter that is in motion, and that is the fundamental underlying reality of the universe, then all that we could know or all that we would come to know is done through natural processes. So we would have to look at the laws that govern matter and govern natural processes and chemical functions to understand how knowledge is formed. And then we would need to apply tests to that and say, does that actually make sense with what we know and what we experience in the world? The other would be if we believe that God is at that centerpiece of reality and that he has created us in his image and embodied us as spiritual beings, and that as spiritual beings we have minds, then how does that work in the process of what we can know and how we come to know it? So, how we answer these questions is fundamental to how we not only see reality, but how we answer many of the other questions in this set of 12. Again, how we answer these and how we come to the next one, another concern is and the fourth concern is origin. Answering the question, where did it all begin? Where did everything come from? Where did the cosmos come from? All time, space, matter? Where did that come from? Science points that all the scientific data we have points to there being a beginning in the finite past. Well, where did that come from? And ultimately, where did I come from? Can we know it? How would we know it? And from that leads us into the fifth question of who am I? When I look out through my eyes and I see with my mind the world that I am experiencing, what does this mean for me to refer to myself? What type of being am I? And do I exist? Am I simply my body, or am I something beyond my body? Where does this idea of the self live? Again, the answer to this question is highly dependent upon how we answer the other questions. If I go back to my friends who are a materialist and all things are matter, and the only thing that makes up me is matter, then I am my body. But wait a minute, what happens when I chop a finger off? Am I no longer myself? Or am I the same person, but just missing a physical part of my body? How do we answer that? That comes into identity of who am I and what am I? And that is directly related to how we see ultimate reality. And this gets into many of our other hot button topics that, eventually we're going to talk about here on Elysian Ends, as to things like, what does it mean for a human being in the womb? What is that thing, and how do we look at what that thing is? A lot of how we answer these worldview questions and how we lay a foundation for these worldview questions are going to come into play as we get into some of the other questions that our society and culture is asking right now. And that comes into this next question. Who am I? And number 6, my location. Where am I? Not just geographic location, as in I live just outside of Houston, Texas, but where am I in time, in this moment of human history? As I record this, we're in May of 2022. But what does that mean to be living in the 21st century and what we have from the standpoint of all of history? And what is my responsibility of who I am based on what I am and what is real to act and behave in this moment in time? These are very important questions. It governs how I live my life, and it governs how I aim my life. What is that end in which my life is pointed to? Furthermore, as we go down the list, number 7, and I hope that you can see how all of these questions are dependent upon one another. We've got to have this coherence between one another, or very quickly we can find where we're not able to answer one question if we don't have the right answer to the other question. Number 7 is going to be highly dependent upon how I answer my other questions. Number 7 is morality. How should I live? Not only within the cultural context that I'm in, so understanding things like what does it mean to have good manners, but objectively right and wrong. Is how do I understand what is right and wrong? See, for a Christian, we believe our right and wrong is rooted, it's anchored in something that is transcendent outside of us. It's anchored in God. He is the standard of all things that are good, and therefore, what he commands is good. He created us. He created us for a purpose. And so he would know what is good for us, and so we should pursue those things that are good for us. Now, there are other answers to morality. Christians don't have, they're not the only ones that have an answer for what morality is. Others may believe that morality is based upon social norms or social contracts, what society believes to be right and wrong. Others believe in an evolutionary process, so that morality has come about through the evolution of mankind, evolution of biology, eventually to mankind, which is where nature gains its consciousness and then develops these moral standards and moral guidelines. How you answer that question, what's right and wrong, highly depends upon how you answer other things about reality. And then finally, one of the things is values. What is it that we should consider to be of great worth? Do I pursue money as being ultimately of great worth? Is it, or do humans, do they have great worth? Is our worth based upon some kind of extrinsic value, what's outside of us, right? So maybe how much we produce or how much good we do, that determines our value. Or is there an intrinsic value, something that is inside of us by the very thing that we are, the very nature of what we are, that makes us valuable? How do we answer that? Finally, what is the predicament? Not finally, but number 9, what is the predicament? What is humanity's fundamental problem? When we look out, I can sit down, I have a good friend of mine who is an atheist. I have other friends who are agnostics. I have folks that have a variety of different worldviews. And one thing that we can sit down around the table and all agree upon is that there's something fundamentally wrong with the world. There's a fundamental problem. There's pain. There's suffering. And we as human beings, we know that pain and suffering is bad. But why? Why is it bad? What is that fundamental problem that plagues all of us in this world? And number 10 is, what is that resolution? What is number 9, what is the problem to be solved? And then 10, what is that resolution to that problem fundamentally? Is the resolution something that we will find as a human species and we will rise up and overcome as a species? And maybe it's through technology, maybe it's through our ingenuity that we will overcome this problem? Or is it that we need something that is bigger than us, something that is greater than us? Maybe what we need, our resolution, is more of a rescue. We need a rescuer from our problem. How you see reality and how you answer the questions prior to this will play into what the resolution and what the ultimate problem is inside of a worldview. But remember, we'll get to critiquing ideas later on. Right now, we're just trying to understand what is inside of this particular idea or framework called a worldview. Number 11 is past and present. Past and present. And it's really looking at history and what is the direction of time? What is the meaning of history? And what is the direction of history? Do we have any sort of forward path that we're on? Do we live inside of a story that is a story about something grander, something greater than us? Or is this really, there's no story at all? It's more of a a meaningless existence that we have, and we are just simply here, and either on some worldviews we're destined to repeat in subsequent lives over and over and over through a process of reincarnation until we finally get it right, or is there a true beginning and a true destination, a what's called an eschatology, an end of all things that we will experience inside of history. Now, I'm going to pause here before I get to the 12th concern that we should take a look at in developing a worldview. And, maybe you've heard this list of questions and you're thinking, wow, thinking about all of this is really too much. And, perhaps maybe some of these questions you may be thinking are a little bit too hard to dive in to find what is at the root or what is that ultimate answer for this. And, maybe for some, you think that all of this is just too, philosophical, or these are questions that are great for philosophers to sit around and answer and discuss, or maybe those who live simpler lives that have more time to wrestle with these things. But this final ultimate concern, this final question inside of a worldview is something that all of us will face. It's something that all of us will eventually have an answer to. And the answer to this one is really the equalizer of all life. It's what takes the richest of the rich, the poorest of the poor, the happiest, the most the saddest and depressed, and it equalizes everything in this life. And that is destiny. The question of destiny. We all have one life to live, and we're all going to die at some point. And so destiny is ultimately that question of, will I survive the death of my body? And if I do, in what state am I going to survive in? Now we can set aside some of the other concerns. We can possibly live our life in a way where we turn a blind eye, or we just take in or imbibe answers to some of those other questions as we get them off of social media. But destiny, the question of death and what happens, it's something that we all ponder. It's something that we all think about at some point in time in our life. Sometimes it's when we get that diagnosis that we have cancer or we have some other ailment. Maybe it's when a close loved one passes away suddenly and we begin to question, what is this meaning? Is there meaning to life? And what actually happens when this person is no longer with us? So destiny will affect us all. And we will all have an answer to this ultimate concern at some point. And so what we have to understand is that whether we turn a blind eye to these questions, or whether we believe that we're turning a blind eye to these questions, or whether we engage our intellect and we engage these questions, we all have a worldview or a philosophy of what is real. We all have this philosophy. And we must understand that whether the answers that we have to the concerns of our worldview contain answers that actually align with reality. So we come across these questions of what's right and wrong in our daily lives. What we plug in as an answer to that concern, we need to know if that answer aligns with what is real, what is true about the world. And we also need to look across these concerns and say, do I have answers inside of these concerns that have this coherence with each other? Or do they contradict with each other? Like, do I believe that Christianity is true, but yet at the same time, I believe that morality is what we make of it? Because those two things would contradict with one another, and we wouldn't have a coherence between the answers. Most importantly, though, think about this. We all live one life on this earth. We die, and then eternity comes. Whatever the answer to destiny is, we live one life, we die, and then eternity comes, whatever that is. And if the way that we live this one life that we have is guided by our worldview, but whether it's because we have misinterpreted information, whether it's because we have been intellectually lazy and haven't given deep thought to our worldview concerns, or whether it's because we seek to fit in with the majority, whatever the reason, if the way we live our one life is guided by our worldview, but our worldview contains wrong answers, then how will we spend this one life, this one shot that we got? How will we spend this one life if our worldview has wrong answers to the fundamental concerns? Seeking answers to these questions, sure, it can be a challenge, but it can also be incredibly rewarding. As a Christian, thinking through some of these deep questions, some of the deepest questions in life, can bring us to a whole new appreciation of God and our relationship to Him. It can also help us understand some of our weaknesses, and maybe some of our weaknesses in the way we're thinking about the world, maybe some of our weaknesses in areas of our life where we need to grow, and perhaps some ways that maybe we need to improve. So as a Christian, we should desire more than anything, when we get to the end of this life, to hear those words, "Well done, good and faithful servant." But to do that as a Christian, to hear those words, "Well done, good and faithful servant," we must understand reality. We must first understand reality, because after all, reality is what God has created. And so for us to see reality, to truly see all that our Lord has created for what it really is, we must see that within our worldview, right? We have to see that through the interpretive lens that we have as being our worldview. But it can't just be any worldview. We're only going to see what our Lord has created for us, for Him, His story, and placed us in it. We're only going to see that the right way if we see it through the lens of a biblical worldview.